Welcome back to another episode. Now, before I get started and show you the progress that I made since the last video, I would like to thank one of my subscribers, Sergeant Brewdog, for his book recommendation he gave me. The name of the book is The Cabin Boat Primer, and it got published back in 1913 for the first time, so the content is somewhat old. And I haven't read all of it yet, but some, and it seems like the book covers every topic around houseboats, from personal experiences to an actual building plan and just some recommendations regarding the equipment and the troubles you might run into. And so far the book is very fascinating. I'm really enjoying it, and chapter number 2 especially sparked some of my memories, and I thought it might be worth explaining why. This map shows the Yukon River in its full length, starting in Canada and then flowing through Alaska and ending in the Bering Sea. In Chapter 2, the writer describes his journey floating down the river from Circle all the way to the Bering Sea. Now, this is an adventure that I can relate to very closely, since I did this trip, ironically, exactly 100 years later in 2013, with my friend Sandro, with the exception that we started in Whitehorse instead of Circle, which lengthened the trip from 1900 kilometers to over 3,200 kilometers, and 3 months of a really beautiful, exciting time, here and there painful and nerve-wracking as well, but overall it was a very positive and life-changing experience. So thanks again for that book recommendation and for bringing back memories of probably one of the best times in my life. Alright, now there was another subscriber, Red Hammer. He commented on part number 2 of this build, and he mentioned that it looked like the hatch is somewhat in my way while climbing up on the roof, and he suggested to put the hinge on the opposite side, put a little stop chain on it, and that way I also would have a somewhat of a railing. Now I have to say, I don't feel like the hatch was really in my way, but what a great idea of utilizing the hatch in the same time as a railing. I wish I would have thought of this. Now I glued already plywood strips in place to support the screws for the hinge, and since I'm not going to use that hatch very often, I'm not going to change it anymore, but I really just like when people put some thought into this while watching the videos. Anyways, I think that's enough talk, so let me show you the progress that I made. As of right now, the boat is sitting on 2 of those beams, and to be precise, it's actually sitting on a couple of leg screws, which is a little bit concerning because with each piece that I install in the boat, I increase obviously the weight, and therefore I also increase the shear load on those. So I gotta change something here, and I thought if I put those beams on wheels, I might be also a little bit more flexible and be able to push this boat to the left and right. And those wheels can handle 200 kilo, that's about 440 pounds, and I got 8 of them. That should handle this boat until it's finished. And it might be also a way to move this thing out of here in the future, but that's far away, so for now let's get those wheels installed. Well, this did not work out the way I wanted to at all. All 4 of those wheels on the outside here did not make any contact with the ground. So all the weight is sitting now on the inside. I guess what happened here over time, the beam started to bend through under all of the weight. It's not the end of the world. I'm just gonna change my strategy now and move those wheels from the outside as close to the inside as I can here. And hopefully all 8 of them will make contact. It's quite important. I don't want to overload those wheels and I don't want them to fail. So yeah, let's do this real quick. Yeah, like I said, it wasn't that big of a deal to move them closer to the center, and that eventually worked out. all 8 of the wheels took a somewhat equal amount of pressure. Now, of course, I had to test how easy it would be to move the boat around, so I started to clean up the floor a bit, just to make sure the wheels won't get blocked by any debris, like a rock or a chunk of wood. And then it was time to give her a pull, and I was actually shocked how well this worked and how little effort it took to move it. Now it was time to continue with the foam installation. I will spare you the time-consuming process of cutting and measuring each individual piece of foam. Really not my favorite task, lots of climbing in and out of the boat, and all those tiny pieces of foam that you produce by cutting it are really nasty to clean up. And of course I try to make them fit as tight as possible, so there's no air gap between the foam and the framing, which didn't make it any easier to install. I filled the ceiling in a similar fashion off camera, and before I did that I had to make sure I had enough wood behind the paneling so I don't just nail into the foam later on. It paid off though to make more of those arches than I originally thought I need. It came in really handy here since it had already the exact measurements that I needed. Also, since I pushed the foam in an arch shape as well, I had to install those little blocks to make sure it doesn't rattle out and comes down on me in the future. That is in particular important because I will need that hollow space between the paneling and foam for some wiring later. I recently got a pretty good deal on some underlayment plywood. That stuff is light, super smooth, and about 1/4 of an inch thick. So that's what I'm going to use for the interior paneling here. And for most of it, I'm just using 18 gauge brad nails to attach them. So one thing I noticed, and I'm not quite sure how visible this is on the camera, and I apologize for the poor lighting right now, but those panels, they sag through a little bit between the rafters. Usually not that big of a deal here because I will attach so much stuff to the walls that will help to support that, but on a ceiling that's a different story. There won't be pretty much anything attached to the ceiling, and that will look quite sloppy. So I think I'm gonna install a whole bunch of strips to have something to nail on. So that's what I'm gonna do next. One thing I almost forgot is that I had to drill some holes to the rafters so I can feed some wire through. Those will be the only wires behind the paneling. The rest will be simply hidden behind cabinets and some trim. That was a lot of work and well worth it, but there was one more thing left to do to wrap this up, and that was painting it with 2 coats of white paint. Even though the paneling looked kind of nice the way it was there, but trust me, there were more imperfections and discolorations than you can see on camera. And besides that, bright colors make a room look bigger, and that is worth gold in such a small space. All the ugly seams will be covered eventually with trim, but since I don't know yet where exactly things will go, it's not worth doing this now. Well, there you have it. That's where we're at. Now, before I end the video, let me mention real quick 2 tools that I found to be absolute time savers. The first one is this Oscillating multi-tool. This thing was absolutely amazing. I actually started to prefer it over the jigsaw and the table saw when it comes to cutting down those 1/4-inch panels. That's because it didn't leave any tear out. And I know there are all those tricks with tape and 0 clearance inserts for the table saw, but this was just easier, more convenient. The other tool is this teeny tiny mini plane here from Stanley. Look, the reality is nothing here is as square as it should be, so there were many situations where I just had to taper off an edge by maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, and this little guy did an awesome job, so I highly can recommend that. Okay, that will be it for now. Thanks for your interest. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you in the next episode.